Here is an example of a question 1 on the AMC8. AMC8 is meant for students up to grade 8, and it has 25 questions. So the first question is usually an introductory one that hopefully makes everyone have a chance to solve. I wrote you a question 1, which is very similar to a question 1 that appears on an AMC8, but I did choose the numbers to be interesting so we can have a discussion at the end as well. This question says that there's a pirate, Blackbeard, gave half his gold coins to Pirate Anne. And then he gave Pirate Christopher 18 coins, leaving 72 for himself. How many coins did Blackbeard start with? I also want to say, in every problem I give, the numbers are chosen carefully, and I also sometimes choose the names carefully. As some history, Blackbeard is one of the most famous pirates that was in the Western world. And Anne is one of the most famous female pirates. Now, in this problem, if you read it, you give half the coins and then there are some more coins given and some left. I want to talk about different ways to do this because one of the tricks to making sure you do a question right is to know more than one way to do the problem or to know a way to check it. Because even though the question itself is not difficult, usually the reason why on an AMC8 your score is low is because you make a mistake. So I want to share different ways so you don't make a mistake. The first way to talk about this, when you see a question like this, and there are numbers all the way to the end, it's the easiest to work backwards. So if you know that there are 72 left for himself at the end, if there are 72 left for himself at the end, then at the time that he's giving Christopher 18 coins, well, then we can work backwards. And we can say that at this particular time, right here, before he gave 18 coins to Christopher, how many coins did he have? He had 18 plus 72. What's 18 plus 72? If you add them together, it's a little bit of a trick. Sometimes you add them and you get 100. That's not right. You have to make sure you add carefully. This sum is 90. I chose these numbers because 18 and 72 actually appear very commonly in geometry. I will talk a little bit about that in a moment. And this sum, 18 plus 72 equals 90, is a useful thing to have seen. In mathematics, when you're doing these problems, some numbers come up very frequently. And so it's useful to remember what they are. So whenever I have 1872, it's 90. Now, if that's what's here, that's after he gave half his gold coins. And so that means that before he gave half his gold coins, I should times 2. And so all the way out here, the answer should be 90 times 2, which I've also chosen carefully. 90 times 2 is 180. Actually, although this is an easy problem, I wanted to use it to share some of the very common calculations that you see when you work with geometry. That's actually how I also chose the title of the problem, Supplementary. Supplementary means two angles that add up to 180. So that was a hint here. These are two complementary angles. Why I'm talking about this is because if you are used to seeing these numbers, then when you start adding them, you will make less mistakes because you will remember that you've seen those before. But the other piece I want to share is that if you want to make sure you don't make a mistake when you're doing these questions quickly, the other way to make sure you don't make a mistake is to find another way, a different way of doing it again. Because if you do it twice the same way, you might make the same mistake twice. It's most powerful if you have two different ways so you can double check your answer. Usually on a question like this, I would say that the way to go back would be to pretend that you start with the 180. This is called plugging in your answer to check. If you start with 180, and then you give half of them to Anne, how many are left? Well, at that point, 180 divided by 2 is 90. Okay. Now, from 90, you give Pirate Christopher 18. What's 90 minus 18? It's 72 for himself. And so you say that the story is correct. So now I've checked it two ways. This is very important because, especially on AMC8, for many of you, the difficulty will be to try to make sure you don't make mistakes. And this way of doing two different ways quickly will help to prevent that. The last thing I wanted to comment is also something about the choices of the numbers. 18, 72, 90, why these are so common numbers. And this is now not about this AMC problem, but maybe about the theory of these numbers. 72 appears very, very commonly in geometry because the number 72 is 360 divided by 5. How can you see that? Well, one way of seeing that is to say that 36 times 2 is 72. And so if I was taking 360 divided by 5, dividing by 5 is like taking away the 0 and multiplying by 2. But because of this, this means that whenever I draw a regular pentagon, this has 72 inside it. In particular, the 72 comes from the center, right here. This is a 72-degree angle. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to use numbers, which you may see again somewhere in geometry, because in the end, all of these numbers are actually your friends. And the better you get to know them, the more accurate you are working with.